Wrapping up hour one of this week's episode of Implicit Bias, I'm your host, Kevon Bordelon. We are coming to you from the TSPL, the Top Secret Podcast Lair, located somewhere in downtown Lafayette, Louisiana. We've got a great crew for you. That's crew with a K here this week. And we got some great weekly whiskeys. We were talking about our favorite stories of 2024 in the last segment. And this story just happens to tie in because my favorite story was the media being exposed for basically what they are, which is majority propaganda. Well, this story came out, and I had to call it out. I found it on the rabbit hole on X, but I actually found the article. It came from tabletmagazine.com online. And what they did was they went back and looked at print media since the 1970s. And they did a word count of the time that race, racist, racism was used in print since the 70s. And the count, as you can imagine, was staggering as we got to, call it what, 2016, 2020? Caleb, what's your joke? You're laughing over there about something. Do you not remember this? Or?
No, I do, but Walker did what I told him to do, and it made me laugh.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
So, inside joke. Caleb's picking on Walker, trying to get him to break up with his girlfriend. Actually trying to get his girlfriend to break up with him by telling Walker to do stupid stuff.
I'm just hoping she realizes that's how we are. We never grow up.
This is true. No, we don't grow up.
All right, so print media.
That's why we do the show. But
terms
print media,
such as race, racism, racist.
Okay, since 1970, the New York Times, take a guess what the percentage delta was that print media between, now this is 1970 to 2020. So not including the last 4 years.
So is there, wait, so we're going to have a different percentage for after the last 4 years? So during the last 4 years?
We don't have that count, but this is just an increase on what led to maybe some of the issues that we had leading up to 2020.
So what is the percentage increase from 1970 to now?
Correct.
2,875%.
Not as far off as you probably think. Did anybody see the article that I sent and catch the number? 712% increase. That's just the New York Times. The Los Angeles Times, 756% increase. The Washington Post, 361% increase. And the Wall Street Journal, 468%.
I would love to see like a scale of where the peak increase was.
The peak increase was 2019 to 2020 or 2017 to 2020.
So all of a sudden, did it become trendy to call someone racist?
Or maybe they were creating a story instead of reporting the story.
But the news media wouldn't just do that. It's not like aliens invaded.
Correct. Here's the really interesting part. If you look at a Gallup survey of how people felt about race relations from 1970 until 2020, they were pretty even, if not getting better, until about 2017 when everything started to skyrocket.
See, and I grew up, we were one of the few white families in the neighborhood, and we never had, I didn't know people, could be racist like people said they were. It wasn't until I joined the military and met people from further up north where I was like, "Ooh, ooh."
I'm not saying, but I mean, we've seen it.
Well, down here we're a melting pot. You have, you could probably count every race that you can think of, but they're all still a human race within one block. We have all these different kinds of ethical, different backgrounds, ethnic races, different backgrounds and all that. And
ethnicities.
That's the word I was looking for. And you look at it in our food and everything else, and we commend people and we commend people's backgrounds because your heritage is part of who you are and where you come from. It builds you into the person that you are today. And other places condemn it.
Danny, you wanted to chime in?
Oh, yeah. 2017 coincides with Trump.
So,
and think of it. This man had won numerous awards from the NAACP and all these other black groups. And all of a sudden, when he's elected president as a Republican, He's racist.
So, Danny, that's a huge call out, right?
Yeah.
Tabletmag.com has this, and the actual article, and I'm glad that you called that out, but the article is actually titled How the Media Led the Great Racial Awakening. And then the subtitle is Years Before Trump's Election, the media dramatically increased coverage of racism and embraced new theories of racial consciousness that set the stage for unrest. Now, this article was written in 2020, but amazing how it didn't make headlines in 2020. It didn't get promoted on social. You didn't see it. Why? Because it didn't fit the narrative. Because they didn't want you to know who was pulling the strings behind the scenes. The invisible hand, it's there. We know it's there. But the media has been running that invisible hand for a very long time. Or let me rephrase that. They maybe haven't been running the invisible hand. They have been executing the desires of the invisible hand for a very long time.
I mean, every puppeteer needs a puppet.
In my mind, we need to just quit even talking about racism and talk about bigotry.
Tell me more.
All right, here's a good example. When I was little, my father was a nightclub musician. My mother, redheaded Irish woman, has a big nose. They went to stay in a small hotel somewhere where my dad was playing in a nightclub. They wouldn't let them stay because the owner of the hotel thought my mother looked Jewish, and they didn't allow Jews in the hotel.
Really?
Interesting thing was the piano player
Was Jewish. And they didn't know.
but he didn't look it. So Dave was okay. We couldn't stay there because my mom, the redheaded Irish woman, whose ancestry traces back to the next boat after the freaking Mayflower, looked Jewish to that person. We had to find another hotel.
So I think one of the big issues was when the word racism was redefined and it was said, oh, well, if you look a certain way, you can't be racist. Wait a minute. We're going to define the word. The word racism is to hate, discriminate against someone because of their ethnic background, period. Which means no matter what you look like, you cannot like someone else because of their race.
Actually, that's not true. I mean, your definition is...
Well, my definition is not a Webster's definition.
Right. But, and this is part of the problem, we have morphed racism into bigotry against ethnicities. For instance, Hispanic is not a race. Caucasian is a race. Hispanic is not a race. But we've labeled that and made that part of the whole anti-racism thing. Which is blurring all the lines and making things even harder to discuss.
Yeah,
I never thought about that because when you fill out a background check, it asks you your race, and it doesn't. Hispanic's not on there. Underneath it, it says ethnicity.
Correct.
Hispanic or not.
But the races on there are generally Caucasian, Black,
Asian,
and Asian.
Yep.
Or
they'll have, I think some will have Native American
North
or Pacific
American.
Islander, that kind of stuff too.
Yeah,
Sometimes.
Pacific Islander.
It's a really interesting thought process with what the definitions, with what the media has done. And to me, this is the big takeaway. Are there Caucasians who don't like other races? Sure. Are there other races who don't like Caucasians? Sure. But the whole point becomes nobody gets special treatment. Nobody gets a pass. Nobody is said, oh, you can't be racist. Everybody can. And that's where it needs to go, as opposed to the narrative that the media has desired to put out there in 2024 and 2020 and 2017 and 2016, which is, oh, if you look like this, you can't be bad. Because if you look like that, those people have always been bad to you. That's not a true story.
every group has good people and bad people, and it's
Sure.
it's our job as good people to say, hey, look, we don't stand for that.
Correct.
You cut it out. And that's what you do with a child. You're like, hey, stop.
But that's
And-
why I think we need to focus more on bigotry than
Well,
racism or ethnicity or anything like that.
Jonathan, do you want to chime in before I follow up on this? I saw you leaning in.
I'm just going to piggyback on what Danny said about keeping it out there. It's always out there. I think some celebrity, and I think it might be Morgan Freeman, who was asked about his success as an African-American person and being treated with less respect because of his race. And he inwardly said, look at my success. My success should show you that I'm not
Yeah, it's never been a
picked on,
problem.
right? And he also said, the problem is we talk about it too much.
Well, and
We're
look,
talking about it.
Lil Wayne has said the same thing. Lil Wayne actually said, I was shot in the chest as a kid. My life was saved by a couple of New Orleans police
Oh, I
officers.
remember that story.
And there
yeah.
were a lot of police officers who looked like me, who walked over me, and it was somebody who didn't look like me who said, what are you doing? Get this kid out of here. We got to save this kid's life. And he said, so I don't see it. This, to me, is where we have to go back to. It's an axiom we have here on the show, which is believe none of what they say, believe only what they do. Stop listening to what the media says about people. Oh, this person is that way. You don't know that. What has the person physically done to prove it? Well, they can't give you any examples. Why? Because it hasn't been done. They just want to create the label. And this is what, to me, brings me back to the whole entirety of what I love about 2024. People are starting to see through it. Because the media has been busted for lying in so many occasions, for slandering people, for saying things that just simply aren't true. I love that the ladies on The View have turned into a walking legal disclaimer. I love it. Why? Because that's all they've ever, that they should have been that for years, because they get on there and they talk about things that they don't know. They talk about people that they hugged and loved and now hate. Why? Because they didn't vote for him. Well, you know what we need you to vote for, because we need you to stick around. We want you to vote for hour 2 of Implicit Bias, which is always more fun. We're going to lighten up the topics. We're going to have some more fun. If your affiliate is not with us in hour 2, call the station. Tell them you want more Implicit Bias. Tell them you want more fun in hour 2 of your favorite Saturday show, Implicit Bias.